to NewFinance and Hotwire. Welcome to our FinTech Academy on Public Relations. Very quickly, the agenda. Sola's going to do an introduction to PR 101.
Yep.
And then we've got Daniel, an entrepreneur, who's going to tell you his experiences from PR. So we're going to get some practical experience here. And then we're going to have some breakout tables. As you know, we've got some scenarios there. There are some free guides and so on. So you've got about an hour with some PR experts from Hotwire. And then you can bring your issues here and so on. And we'll have a little reflection at the end. So, Sola, I'm just going to hand over to you.
Yep.
Okay.
So, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Sola Kirko and I work here at Hotwire. We are a tech PR agency. We specialize in different niches and subsectors within technology, one being very surprisingly FinTech. And that's why you're here tonight. So, things we are going to take a look at. We are going to talk a little bit about me. Very little, promise. And then we are going to take a look at what is PR and a few ideas on where to start, understanding the basics, and then just a couple of words on measurement. This is a very short presentation, so I'm not claiming that I will actually be able to tell you everything about PR, but the idea is that I can give you some initial thoughts and ideas for then work with the rest of your team in at your tables and get some good thinking going. So about me, I worked agency side for pretty much the entirety of my career, from very small agencies to big international players like Hotwire. I worked for startups as well. So if you are in the process of planning your comms campaign or PR campaign, I feel your pain. I know how difficult it is. I know that you don't have the time or the money, probably, or both. So totally understand that. And FinTech has been a passion of mine since 2008. And back then, it really wasn't cool at all. But I persevered, and now I can share my time with lovely people like you. So all presentations normally have a good narrative, which I'm hoping this one will have, but also a little bit of a personal story and some data. So I did something highly scientific, and I looked at the parental happiness index, which basically maps out the happiness of my parents against my age. So this is when I was born, pretty happy, didn't sleep until the age of 5, not so happy. Fairly decent student when I was in primary school. Adolescence, didn't do very well there. Decided to move in with my boyfriend at that time, not very happy parents. Did well at university, graduated, very happy parents, very proud. Started working in PR. Parents very confused. Didn't really know what it was about, and this is actually the same look that we get from a lot of people we work with. And when you don't know what something is about, the first thing that you do is Google it. And what normally comes up is a Wikipedia page. And the Wikipedia page for PR, it kind of is this really long, confused blurb that doesn't help you at all. There is a slightly better definition from CIPR, which is an industry association, which basically says public relations is about reputation, the result of what you do, what you say, and what others say about you, which isn't bad. But actually, the wonderful unknown says everything you do or say is public relations. And for tonight and the future, when you go back to your offices, to your spare rooms, wherever you're working from, this is what I would really like you to bear in mind. And Dan is going to tell you his story and very much his personal brand, and everything that he does is his PR. Right, where do we start? I'm going to talk about objectives. And I don't know if anyone wants to have a go and saying what type of objectives a PR campaign could have. I kind of, yes? Did you raise your hand?
It can be so varied. It can be like BP trying to not lose the public opinion. in such a way which destroys their business or the investors. But it can also be trying to promote your business to consumers or users, shall I say, in a more broader sense. But as soon as it's in public domain, it's also affecting your investors, your staff, stakeholders, everyone. So I suppose that's kind of saying what your objective is. I suppose you have to it depends where you are at in your business, what you're trying to achieve, but then whatever you do or say will have an impact across the board, across different stakeholders.
So you did really well there. Very, very well. Well done. This is a list of objectives. And you can probably read them and think, generate sales, that sounds pretty good, yeah. Raise funding, that sounds pretty good too. Actually, this is a list of really bad objectives. And this is a list of objectives that, unfortunately, we see very often coming from our clients and prospects. My point being that really, your PR objectives should be your business objectives in a way, or should be very closely related to your business objectives. So once you've got those in place, then you might want to think about marketing, and then you might want to think about PR, so that when you do something such as increase awareness, you know very well that you're not increasing awareness with a market that is not relevant for you, but you're increasing awareness with the right people in the right place and with the right messages for the right reason. So the first thing that I would like you to think about when you later on you take a look at your scenarios and you work in groups is what's the objective, and really try to be as detailed as possible. These are way too generic, although they look perfectly fine at a first look. Another thing to think about is the difference between channels and audiences. So most people think that the audiences are journalists. Actually, media is the channel that you use. Audiences, these are just an example, are investors, customers, potential partners, etc. So again, later on, when you start taking a look at those scenarios, remember to identify your audiences very, very clearly. Tools and tactics. You will have some, each table has some PR angels that are going to help you out. But even for future reference, when you will do maybe your own plans for your own companies later on, maybe this year or next month, just think about the really diverse toolkit that you have. So on this side, you have your day-to-day toolkit. Your buyers, your product fact sheets, your boilerplates. That's company description that goes at the bottom of a press release normally. Photos, get good photos of yourself. And on this side, some very actually basic tactics. But people normally think about press releases and forget about everything else. Issues jumps are very good. You read the news, there is something you can comment on. That's a great way to get your name in the press by basically piggybacking somebody else's news. So again, your PR angels will help you out coming up with ideas that are not just about press releases. And then what's newsworthy? Anyone who has their own company or is maybe one of their co-founders or really love their job, they think that every single thing that they do is amazing. We have a new release of our product. It is the 1.1.1 version, and it's amazing because it's so much better than the 1.1 version, where actually the press might not agree with you. So things that are highly newsworthy are this. Company or product launch, a sizable funding round, and that actually changes depending on your industry, but anything that is around Series A is good funding. Client wins, partnerships, key appointments. If, say, you appoint someone that has a great background working at Google, that's newsworthy. Thought leadership campaigns and geographical expansion. And here is a little bit of a spoiler. Those are the three you're going to work on tonight.
Excuse me, in terms of company and product launch, how much time after product launch of company does that remain kind of relevant and can still be talked about?
It really depends on the company and on the product. What we always advise is that you have a really strong, solid beta of anything before going public. There is a very strong temptation of saying, the website is live, we really want a lot of journalists to take a look at this, and then what happens is that maybe the website has a typo or has a glitch, or your product isn't quite ready yet because you only had 100 of your friends testing it out, where actually it needs 1,000 people to test it out properly. And, I think Google made beta versions quite sexy since when they launched Gmail. The truth is that they probably did a huge amount of testing before doing that. So I would say it's probably always nice waiting until when your product is quite solid and has been tested. But the length depends really on the product or company that we are looking at.
But then isn't that a problem of, if it hasn't got loads of users by the time it's been tested, then it can be kind of a flop. So you might have a really cool, it's all about selling the dream. You're always better off selling the dream than actually then the product's actually issued, and then the reality starts kicking in. And it doesn't necessarily kind of match what the dream was. So it might just be kind of a dip and then comes back up, but then it can actually delay everything by 6 or 12 months.
Yeah. So I'm going to say something shocking. Honesty actually is a really good thing. So sometimes we find that it's quite good to be honest with journalists and the public. So we find that it's quite good to just interact with people and be quite open and say, we only have this much ready and we don't quite know what's going to happen, but we would like you to take a look at this. If you think it's newsworthy, then yes, write about it. But actually what we're after is also your feedback. So that way you're not positioning yourself as, this is it, we're ready. And if you go through those ups and downs that, you will go through, then you're kind of setting expectations in advance. And I'm sure a lot of you might be interested in the measurement side of things. I invest this money into my campaign, my time, which is a huge asset for all of you. How do I measure PR? This would actually require a complete evening session focusing on this only. Bottom line is there is a huge debate going on in the industry at the moment about data, insights, creativity, whether data and insights are supporting creativity or killing it. There is actually that's a link to a Medium post you can take a look at if you're interested in a little bit more background information. The key thing I would suggest you focus for tonight and the future is the difference between output versus outcome. So the output is I've sent out one press release. The outcome is my phone rang because someone saw that piece of coverage and they thought that my product was very cool and they wanted to meet with me. So that's a huge difference. There is, if you're interested, a industry body called AMEC that really provides a huge amount of free resources on how to look at PR and how to measure it, and just some suggestions on things you can keep track of. So something else maybe to follow up with. And I'm sure there is like a huge amount that I haven't covered because it's just a very short presentation, but we have prepared a list of 10 questions that we get asked very frequently and 10 areas, subject areas that come up very, very frequently. And there is a guide on your tables and it's also going to be available digitally, so you can take a look at things like how do I set up my social media presence or stuff like that. Now, it's going to be your turn very soon, but before that, we are going to hear something from Dan and his experience. You're going to have 3 scenarios, 3 groups, 3 PR angels, plus a couple of people supporting them in each table, around 45 minutes. We don't expect you to come up with a full plan, because otherwise we would be out of business. So you can't do that in 45 minutes. But the idea is perhaps to discuss, challenges and issues and coming up with some ideas and sharing among yourselves. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Great. We now have an entrepreneur's experience. So clearly Sola is a director here at Hotwire. We now have Daniel, who's an entrepreneur who's been through this process, so we're going to hear his experience in using PR.
Perfect. Thanks, Eddie. So hey everyone, I'm Dan. I'm the CEO of CurrencyTransfer.com. Just to give you my little elevator pitch, it won't only be 10 seconds. We've built the world's first online marketplace that matches businesses with the most competitive international payment quotes. You can see us as almost a Kayak or an Expedia for business foreign exchange. But I promise you throughout the whole presentation, I don't refer to our company at all. And in fact, 80% of the presentation is almost when we started working with Hotwire, and it all emanated from just getting out the building, telling our story. And what I'd like to kind of show you guys is some of the inspirational figures that have sort of guided how we did PR working with Hotwire, and how, whatever stage of the product, or your business you're at, whether, you're just coming up with your idea, or, you've got your beta out, or whether, you've just done your Series A, I think a lot of these concepts will apply. And, to some degree, I don't think anyone needs to use a PR agency until you get to a certain degree. And, and I think there are certain stages where I think you do need to use a PR agency, and I'll show you, when that is. So, it started back almost 3 years ago with us. We didn't have a bean in our bank account. We didn't have the ability to do pay-per-click marketing or, embark on big sort of, performance marketing campaigns, start driving traffic to our site. So when it came to the subject of PR and telling our story, there are a lot of interesting people in the market that portrayed themselves to be PR marketing experts. Very predatory, comes to you and say, I'll help you for X, Y, and Z, a little bit of equity. But, me and Stefan, my co-founder, took a step back and said, right, who are some of the heavyweights online that we really admire, their thinking and their, the language they use in terms of how you can elevate your brand and get your story out there and be spoken about. And, for us, in terms of our experience, it boiled down to three major mentors who still today, we try and do a lot of our inbound marketing and our PR and our social in line with a lot of, what they preach. So the first is Gary Vaynerchuk, who I highly recommend, if you don't know who he is, to look into him in terms of how to almost crush it on social. First, it all boils down to hustle. You've got to have the ability, in my opinion, in 2014, to almost, be on the platforms, whether it's Twitter, Google+, tell your story and almost be naked. You can't really, in this day and age, conceal too much. Tell your story. There are so many opportunities to, capture different moments in your startup's ecosystem. And, if you mix in the right circles, that gets picked up. So Gary Vaynerchuk was a big inspiration of ours. He built his father's wine business purely off the back of a YouTube daily video about wine. And he just went on, he said, content is king, but marketing is the queen, and marketing rules the house. He went on Twitter, he went on all the networks, and he hustled, and he got it out there, and he got people talking about him. So Rand Fishkin from SEO Moz. In my opinion, I see SEO, PR, so intertwined, community. At the end of the day, in my opinion, every other channel, social, search, email, content, viral, you need to be part of the community where people are talking about FinTech. It's, I think you being at some of these meetups and, being part of the community is absolutely essential. And obviously Eric Ries, which is probably not, in terms of linking lean methodology to PR, the way I see it is, you have to learn what customers really want, not what they say they want or what we think they should want. By getting out the building very, very early on and doing your problem interviews, your solution interviews, your MVP interviews, that is such valuable and rich data you can take back to yourselves, to your PR agencies, and say, right, this is how the customers talk about the product. This is how they perceive us. And that becomes invaluable when you're developing all your sort of communications and your messaging. So what do we do? You know, when TV, billboards, email open rates have sort of crashed, you know, what is, you know, where do we find, you know, ROI, where all these traditional marketing channels are pretty much failing? Now, pretty much all of us throughout a 24-hour period have a mobile within arm's length away from us. We're reading about news on Twitter. We're looking on Facebook, again, as a news medium. But the challenge is, what is the ROI of these channels? Do you dive in to Twitter, Facebook? You know, and I'm pinching this a little bit from Gary Vaynerchuk, but we had a very big debate with one of our potential investors who kept saying, Daniel, what's the ROI of social media? You know, and he kept pushing, you know, show me the metrics, show me the charts. What is, you know, the ROI of you pushing out these tweets? And, you know, it was a challenge. You know, you look up to someone like this, you want this guy's money. But I'll go back and I replied to him, I go, what's the ROI of your mother? And that's my mother over there. I go, I can't pinpoint on a table or on a chart and say, you know, when my mother said to me at university, don't bring me babies, bring me a first. Or, you know, when she said to me, you know, don't go for bronze and silver and gold, and gave me the confidence because she's Israeli and very aggressive and direct and this and that. And that helped me, you know, when I'm going out there and hustling and trying to chase PR. You know, I can't pinpoint that on a chart. I can't pinpoint when you reply to someone and say, at whoever, Mike Butcher, thanks for the follow, when he follows you, or at, you know, this one and that one, when you go on search.twitter and you see the conversations going on. I can't pinpoint that on the chart. But from what we've seen, it's everything. It's led to so much success for us as a business. And I personally believe that, you know, when we start integrating our blogging and our content, you know, when you start building out those conversations, don't worry about too much the direct ROI, because I can assure you, you know, it pays off in the long run. And yeah, the power of a wink, the power of at someone, thanks for the follow. A brand's actually taken the time to say to a customer, thank you for the follow. And in my opinion, the number one mistake everyone makes on Twitter is they see it as a platform where it's just push, push, push. You know, there's a half price sale on this, or, you know, really just selling your product too much. But in reality, Twitter, as an example, and it's just one platform, see it as a cocktail party. You wouldn't go to a cocktail party and walk around to every single person and say, hi, shake their hand, this is what I do. You know, so don't do that on Twitter. You know, use it as a medium where you can have conversations, engage, and really be part of, you know, what's native to that platform. And a very powerful quote from Gary is, part of why you love your parents is because they love you first. Brands need to do that. If you really communicate with your customers in the right way and you don't piss them off and you obsess about how to please them and push out content on all these platforms and take the time, it's very easy just to push anything on these platforms because everyone says you need to be on Facebook, you need to be on Twitter. But the most important is you need to be native when you're telling your story and you're pushing out micro content. And, you know, I think that's a very, very powerful quote. And this quote for me is all about, you know, give, 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 and then take. And it's worked so well for us. It's worked so well for us when it's come to securing coverage, very much in the early days. You know, a story, I helped one of the journalists from The Telegraph with a number of different things, survey, you know, a research of bits of data that we had. I didn't ask for anything. It would have been very easy after the first interaction to say, hey, Liz, you do this weekly Forex focus. You know, we'd be perfect for something like this. I deliberately waited and waited and waited and kept giving because I believe you should give, 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 and then you take later down the line. And that equates to just jabbing. Throw out some jabs. Don't just sell your message every single tweet or every single time you send an email, chuck out that right hook. It pays. You know, I think in 2014, the value we should put on patience when we're out there and we're promoting our message and we're telling our story, whether it be on social media, whether it be at conferences, events, don't go for that right hook immediately. And listening is very, very important. And understand before you go for that close with a journalist, a blogger, You might think you've got the best guest post that you want to write on some type of tech blog or a blog within your niche. Really just take the time. They get so much crap in their inbox. Really take the time to understand, what do they write? Who are their friends? What hashtags they use? How are they native on certain platforms? And I think, if you just take that step back and value that keyword of patience, it really pays dividends in the end. And one of our most powerful marketing tools is actually listening on search.twitter.com. For one of our sister brands, My Travel Money, we type in Heathrow Airport, and you see people complaining, real big aggravation, I just got ripped off at TravelX or Moneycorp, whatever it may be. And you just listen to that conversation, and then you respond, and you add value, and you show patience. You don't say, oh, I've just got someone says, I've just got ripped off at TravelX. You don't reply to them and say, hey, go on My Travel Money where you get 85% cheaper rates than, the airport bureaus. It pays to go back and say, hey, take a screen grab of that shitty rate that you got, and then build content and micro content on top of that. And then, you're perceived as almost a thought leader in the industry when you start taking that, content, you package it into a blog, and then maybe you compare it against your rates online. Again, that value of patience, I think, is very, very important. We use tools as well, like BuzzStream, as a way of really, when we start doing our outreach quite scalably, and we've got an office in Israel, Aviva uses this tool day in, day out, which is fantastic as a way of, you can buzz a website, and it pulls in a lot of information about Twitter handles of, various journalists and a lot of data regarding, potential prospects when you're doing your outreach. And Follower Wonk is a great way of measuring who's an influencer in certain niches, and then you can start following those influencers and really going back to that point that I think before you go on your big push of sort of PR and outreach, the value of listening is very, very important. So at what point do you almost call your PR agency? And, going back to our business, for us, it was launching our new product, currencytransfer.com, and we knew we got into Finovate as a presenting company, and we got into South by Southwest to represent the UK as part of their trade mission. And there was a lot of buzz and momentum built off the back of what me and my colleague Orr and Aviva had done, but we got to the point where we thought there would be tremendous value in having a FinTech specialist PR agency with us in the trenches that know how to work, big sort of launch announcements, which is what we did at Finovate. And for us, that was the motivation. We didn't want to almost waste the opportunity of these big sort of pivotal moments in our sort of startup life cycle. So for me, that was the key kind of let's engage with a PR agency. And we'll get on to the first meeting that we had.
After drinks.
So yeah, for us, it's no secret we're going through a Series A round of investment, so it's very much guided by building that early feel-good factor about our product, the investor love, the inbound interest. It wasn't, we didn't measure it, again, based on all kind of what I believe, in terms of telling your story. It wasn't, okay, Hotwire, we're taking you on for a mini project. These are your deliverables. Get me X amount of leads. Get me X, Y and Z. Because I always knew the coverage they generate, whether we used it at that point in time, we're very much in private beta mode. You can always use it later. We're doing a big pitch tomorrow at level 39. And again, what is the ROI of the CNBC interview or Wired Startup of the Week? It might not be at that moment in time, that one-hit wonder where, the article goes out, customer, clicks through to our site and fills in I want to register for early access. But, you can use coverage creatively. I don't think enough brands do it in so many different ways on your decks. It's almost sort of timeless, sort of that coverage in terms of how you can get the most leverage out of it. And, those were the four main reasons why, the moment was right to engage for us in a PR agency. But again, in my opinion, it wasn't a case of, right, here you go, we signed the contract, do everything yourself, I'm just going to focus on biz dev, partnerships, so on and so forth. I think it's very, very important when you come from a background of, you've done it yourself. I certainly think what Ben Abby and the others appreciated was that, you still kept that momentum of what you were doing and almost complement each other, rather than just say, you get on with it. I think the brands, definitely from speaking to the guys here, that almost say, right, I've got my PR agency, that's my communications, I just need to, obviously let go and do anything. I don't think it works. I think you have to work almost hand in hand. So what did they do for us above and beyond, what potentially we can do ourselves and the contacts and the black book? I almost kind of thought, it's a bit irrelevant. They'll come in and do a fluffy little session about, what does your brand represent? What's your mission? What's your vision? So we had a proper 2-hour kickoff session. And, we spent probably a good hour working out, are we Kayak for currency? Are we Expedia for currency? Are we Money Supermarket for currency? But really taking the time, and the guys went away and they did research and came back and, really taking the time to understand exactly what does your startup do and how we should present this to the outside. And I think it's always good to have that third, fourth, fifth opinion. So we're not Google Analytics or Chinese takeouts, but, I think it's very strong. Someone said today when we did our dress rehearsal for this Swift thing that it's a bit weak to say X for Y. I actually disagree. I think when you're talking to an audience at an event and they don't really understand too much about, let's say, your market, I think nailing that elevator pitch is so, so important. If you probably think back to the times where, you're at these type of events and someone explains what they do, and it's really bloody difficult to actually comprehend what does this company actually do. I think taking the time to really nail down in 15, 20 seconds what is your elevator pitch, that's critically important, and to some degree as important as when you're going on these big sort of PR offenses in the likes of TechCrunch. You need to understand what you represent, and you need to make sure others understand exactly what you do and what you represent. The guys were very heavy on sort of, get as many early stage case studies as you can, and that's very, that was really, leveraging off early users was a tremendous way for us to, say to journalists, look, we're a serious product, we're serious people, you can speak to them if you want. That was pretty important. And Sole was always very keen on, be provocative. A lot of brands are scared to, again, be naked and say, I'm, one of the very impressive companies we admire in our space is TransferWise. And, they're good friends of ours in the industry. You come outside the station at Canary Wharf, you see one of their adverts and it says scammers, the banks in the middle of Canary Wharf. I think having that fearlessness, really pays dividends, and it's almost like a wake-up call for, journalists when you're out there and you're not another Me Too business, and you can really be very powerful in terms of how you present your brand. So yeah, it's a little bit back to kind of when we first met with Hotwire. It was the most terrible meeting in the world. It was me and my co-founder, Sole and Ben. Yep. And, yeah, we really, it was a very prickly meeting in terms of, on many, many levels. But, one thing, when we started talking about, who we are and what we kind of, where we've come from when it's sort of been about PR and creating micro content, like the common bond was talking about that guy, Gary Vaynerchuk, and Sole got it straight away, understood it all. And despite the fact that, for the next 2-3 hours after the meeting, like, we're never working with these guys in history, this is going to be very tough. I think, from a cultural perspective, the guys understood what we are, what type of brand we want to be, what we represent. And I think it's very, very important, whoever you work with, when you get outsiders coming into your business, which is your baby, I think it's very, very important to ensure that, whatever culture you're breeding, whatever, yes, they can come in and make suggestions about messaging and stuff like that and how you can tweak stuff. I think, from a cultural level, there has to be, a really, really strong fit. And yes, so Sole said, the one big takeaway for me is, as far as I'm concerned, I'm no sort of PR expert, but I think it boils down to, get out of the building, hustle until you no longer have to introduce yourself, be that socialite, go to the events, go to the meetups, be part of the community. And I think anyone at whatever stage of the business they're at can create a disproportionate amount of noise. And thanks for your time, and in the spirit of giving, because you're all so awesome, if you want to register on currencytransfer.com, we'll give you free platform fees for life. Thank you.
Yes, so you have scenarios on your tables, and could the lovely Hotwire people raise their hands?
The angels.
They are angels, so just, work in groups, and I think we will convey in 45.
That's good. Brilliant.
Sorry, go on. Perfectly honest, the space is high, so it's got Hotwire. There's a security software.